was standing in the coat check line at the Ritz-Carlton in Charlotte when I first heard my name attached to the word mistake. The wedding reception had just begun. December rain hammered the tall windows while 200 guests milled through the ballroom in their finest clothes, and I was trying to retrieve my wrap because the air conditioning always ran cold in these downtown venues. The coat check girl was new, fumbling with the numbered tags, and the line wasn't moving. That's when I heard my ex-husband laughing somewhere behind me. His voice carried the way it always had, that practiced executive boom he'd cultivated during his years climbing the corporate ladder at Bank of America. I didn't turn around. We'd been divorced for 3 years by then, and I'd learned to navigate Charlotte's black professional circles by mastering the art of strategic invisibility. At events like this, the wedding of Judge Morrison's daughter, you could usually find a corner, make polite conversation, and avoid your past, but his words stopped me cold. "Oh, that was my first marriage," he was saying to someone. "Young mistake. We all make them." The coat check girl finally found my wrap. I took it without looking at her, my hand steady, even though something hot and sharp had lodged itself behind my ribs. I draped the pashmina over my shoulders and walked toward the ballroom, my heels clicking against the marble floor in a rhythm I forced to stay even. Young mistake. Before we dive in, I want to ask you something. Where in the world are you listening from? Drop your city or country in the comments. I love seeing how far our community reaches. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time. Your support truly helps this community grow. Thank you for being here. I was 23 when we married, fresh out of UNC with my social work degree and a head full of plans to change the world one family at a time. He was 25, 2 years into his analyst position, already talking about vice president track and the house we'd buy in Myers Park once he made his first real money. We got married at Friendship Missionary Baptist, my grandmother's church, with 200 people packed into the pews and my mother crying through the entire ceremony. I wasn't a mistake. I was a choice he'd made with his whole heart, or so I'd believed for the 5 years we were together. The divorce had been civil, or at least that's what people called it when lawyers handled everything and nobody threw dishes. No children, which everyone agreed made things simpler. A clean split of assets, which meant I got half of very little since we'd barely started accumulating anything. He kept the condo in South Park. I moved into a 1-bedroom in Plaza Midwood and started over with furniture from IKEA and a determination not to let anyone see me struggling. 3 years later, I'd rebuilt. I was a senior case manager at Mecklenburg County Department of Social Services, handling some of the most complex family situations in the system. My 1-bedroom had become a small house in Noda that I'd bought with my own money. I had friends, a life, a routine that didn't include checking my phone to see if he had called. I'd moved on, or I thought I had, until I heard him reduce our entire history to a mistake he'd made when he was young. I found my assigned table near the back of the ballroom. The Morrison wedding was elegant in that understated way old Charlotte money preferred. Cream roses, string quartet, programs printed on heavy cardstock. I recognized most of the guests. Charlotte's black professional community was large enough to feel diverse, but small enough that you saw the same faces at every significant event. Weddings, fundraisers, Jack and Jill functions, Lynx meetings. We all moved through the same circles, careful not to step on each other's carefully maintained reputations. My table mates were people I knew from various professional contexts. Sharon worked in HR at Atrium Health. David was a partner at a local law firm. Michelle taught at Johnson C. Smith. We made pleasant conversation about the ceremony, the venue, the bride's dress. No one mentioned that my ex-husband was somewhere in this room, probably still talking about his mistakes to anyone who would listen. Dinner was served. Herb-crusted chicken, roasted vegetables, a salad with candied pecans. I ate slowly, participating in the table conversation just enough to seem engaged. Sharon was telling a story about her daughter's college search when I saw him approach the head table. He'd changed since our divorce, Not dramatically, but in the ways men do when they suddenly have money to spend on themselves. His suit was Tom Ford instead of Joe's. A bank. His haircut came from somewhere expensive. He moved with a confidence that looked new, or maybe it had always been there and I'd just stopped noticing it toward the end. The woman with him was exactly what I'd expected. Younger, maybe 26 or 27. Light-skinned with long hair and the kind of delicate features that made men like him feel like they'd won something. She wore a champagne-colored dress that probably cost more than I made in a month, and she smiled up at him with an adoration that looked genuine enough to make my chest tight. I watched him introduce her to Judge Morrison, watched him laugh and shake hands and pull her close with his arm around her waist, watched him be the version of himself he'd always wanted to be. Successful, admired, settled with exactly the kind of woman who would look good in the family photos he'd post on LinkedIn. "That's Vanessa," Sharon said quietly beside me, following my gaze. "They've been together about 2 years. I heard she works in pharmaceutical sales." I nodded, sipping my water. "Good for them." Sharon gave me a look that said she didn't believe my indifference, but she was kind enough not to push. The reception moved into its traditional rhythms. Toasts were made. The bride and groom cut the cake. The DJ started playing music that pulled people onto the dance floor in waves. First the wedding party, then the older generation doing their careful two-step to Al Green, then the younger crowd when the music shifted to something contemporary. I stayed at my table, content to watch. I'd learned that there was power in stillness, in being the person who didn't need to be seen. My phone buzzed occasionally with messages from colleagues, friends checking on details for a work project Monday morning. I responded when necessary and otherwise let the evening flow around me. That's when he appeared at my table. He materialized beside me during a lull in the music, when people were returning to their seats for the next course. His smile was broad, practiced, the same one he wore in all his corporate headshots. "Kiara," he said warmly, "I thought that was you. How have you been?" I looked up at him, my face carefully neutral. "I've been well. Congratulations on your engagement." He glanced back at Vanessa, who was talking to some bridesmaids near the bar. "Thank you. We're very happy. Planning a spring wedding, probably April or May." "That's wonderful." He shifted his weight, and I recognized the gesture. It was what he did when he wanted something but wasn't sure how to ask for it. I'd seen it 1,000 times during our marriage, when he wanted me to call his mother for him, when he needed me to cancel plans so he could work late, when he was about to ask me to be smaller so he could be bigger. "Listen," he said, lowering his voice slightly. "I know things ended awkwardly between us, but I'm glad we can be mature about it now. Charlotte's too small for old grudges, you know?" I nodded, saying nothing. "Vanessa and I are really building something special," he continued. "She's exactly what I need at this point in my career. Someone who understands the demands, the social requirements, someone who can be a real partner in that world." The implication hung in the air between us, that I had not been those things, that I had somehow failed at being the kind of wife his ambitions required. I smiled politely. "I'm sure you'll be very happy together." He seemed encouraged by my response, his posture relaxing. "I appreciate that, Kiara." "I really do, and I hope you know that our marriage wasn't a complete loss. We were both young, both figuring things out. Sometimes people just aren't compatible long-term, you know?" "Of course." He patted my shoulder, a gesture that felt patronizing even as he probably meant it to seem magnanimous. "Take care of yourself, all right? I mean that." Then he was gone, moving back toward Vanessa and his new life, and I sat there with my untouched dessert and the weight of his dismissal settling over me like something I could almost see. Young mistake, not compatible long-term, someone who can be a real partner. I finished my wine and decided to leave before the dancing started again. I said my goodbyes to my table mates, collected my wrap from the chair, and made my way toward the exit. The rain had stopped, and downtown Charlotte glittered with wet streets and reflected lights. I gave my ticket to the valet and waited in the cool air, breathing slowly, deliberately, until my car arrived. The drive home to Noda took 15 minutes. I parked in my small driveway, let myself into my house, and stood in my kitchen with all the lights off, looking at the life I'd built from the pieces he'd left me with. I wasn't crying. I was something else entirely. Something colder and clearer than sadness. I'd been dismissed, reduced, rewritten into a narrative that made his current happiness make sense. And I knew, standing there in my dark kitchen, that I would remember this feeling, that I would carry it forward into whatever came next, that it would inform every choice I made from this moment on. I just didn't know yet how soon I'd need it. The weeks after the Morrison wedding moved slowly, each day carrying the weight of what I'd heard. I didn't tell anyone about the young mistake comment. Not my mother, not my sister, not even Sharon, who would have understood. There was something about speaking it aloud that felt like giving it more power than it deserved. Instead, I absorbed it privately, the way you absorb any truth about how someone really sees you. I went to work, managed my caseload, attended meetings. I showed up for a holiday fundraiser at the Gantt Center and made small talk with people I'd known for years. I bought Christmas gifts for my niece and nephew, helped my mother plan the family dinner, maintained every external marker of a life that was moving forward. But internally, something had shifted. I started noticing things I'd trained myself not to see. The way certain people in Charlotte's professional circles had always positioned me and my ex-husband as a unit that made sense. Two young professionals building something together, and how seamlessly they'd absorbed the new narrative. He'd upgraded. I was the practice round. It was a story everyone understood because everyone had seen it before. What surprised me was how little anyone questioned it. At a holiday party in Myers Park, I overheard two women I knew casually, both married to men who worked with my ex-husband, discussing Vanessa's ring. They talked about the size of the diamond, the setting, how he'd proposed at some restaurant in Uptown that required reservations months in advance. One of them said something about how nice it was that he'd found someone who really fit his lifestyle, and the other agreed with a knowing laugh. I was standing 10 feet away holding a glass of wine, technically part of their social circle. Neither of them looked at me. It wasn't cruelty. It was something more insidious. The casual erasure that happens when your relevance to someone's story has expired. I'd been replaced in the narrative, and the narrative had moved on. I left that party early, drove home through December streets lined with Christmas lights, and sat in my driveway for 20 minutes before going inside. The next day, I did something I hadn't done in 3 years. I pulled out the box from the back of my closet, the one with our wedding album, cards from the reception, a few photos I'd never had the heart to throw away but couldn't bear to display. I looked through it slowly, methodically, studying the face of the 23-year-old woman in the white dress. She looked happy, certain, like she believed the promises being made. I put everything back in the box, drove to a storage facility on North Davidson, and rented a small unit. I placed the box inside, locked the door, and drove away. Not throwing it away. That felt too dramatic, too much like I was still reacting to him, but putting it somewhere I'd never accidentally encounter it. Somewhere it existed without taking up space in my daily life. When I got home, my closet felt lighter. In January, Sharon called me with news that the hospital where she worked was looking for a consultant to help redesign their social work protocols for high-risk family cases. She thought I'd be perfect for it, and would I be interested in interviewing? I said yes. The interview was with a panel of 5 people, 3 administrators, a senior physician, and the current director of social services. They asked about my experience, my approach to crisis intervention, my thoughts on building sustainable family support systems. I answered clearly, confidently, drawing on 8 years of frontline work that had taught me things no textbook ever could. At the end of the interview, the director said something that stayed with me. We need someone who understands that the most important work is often the quietest. Someone who doesn't need credit, just results. I got the consulting position. It was part-time, in addition to my regular work at DSS, but it came with a significant pay increase and the kind of professional recognition that opened doors. My mother was thrilled. My sister texted me 3 celebration emojis and a promise to take me out for dinner. Sharon sent flowers to my office with a card that read, "Told you so." I didn't post about it on social media. I didn't send out announcements. I just accepted the position and started the work, the same way I'd been doing all along, quietly, competently, without needing anyone to witness it. But Charlotte's professional circles noticed anyway. They always did. In February, I was invited to join the board of a nonprofit that provided legal advocacy for families in the foster care system. The invitation came from a woman I'd worked with on a particularly difficult case years ago, a child welfare attorney who'd seen me navigate an impossible situation and apparently hadn't forgotten. I accepted. In March, I was asked to present at a statewide social work conference about trauma-informed approaches to family preservation. The conference was in Raleigh, and 200 people attended my session. Afterward, 3 different organizations asked if I'd be willing to do training for their staff. I said yes to 2 of them. By April, I'd built something I hadn't quite intended, but couldn't deny, a reputation that existed independent of anyone I'd ever been married to. People knew my name because of my work, not because of whose ex-wife I was. When I walked into professional spaces, I was introduced as Kiara Thompson, senior case manager and consultant, not as anyone's former anything. It was a subtle shift, but it mattered. The text message came 6 months after the Morrison wedding, on a Thursday afternoon in June, while I was in the middle of a home visit in West Charlotte. I was sitting in my car outside a house on Tuckasegee Road, finishing my case notes before my next appointment, when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. "Kiara, this is your ex-husband. I need to talk to you. It's urgent. Please call me." I stared at the message for a long moment, my fingers still on the keyboard of my laptop. Urgent. After 6 months of silence following the Morrison wedding, after years of carefully maintained distance, suddenly something was urgent enough to break through. I saved my notes, closed my laptop, and pulled up his contact. I hadn't deleted it, though I'd thought about it plenty of times. I just never got around to it. The same way I'd never gotten around to removing him from my emergency contact list at work or throwing away the single photo of us I still had buried in a drawer somewhere. The phone rang twice before he answered. "Kiara, thank God. Thank you for calling back." His voice sounded different, strained, missing that practiced confidence I'd heard at the wedding. I put the phone on speaker and set it in the cup holder, my hands resting on the steering wheel. "What's going on?" He exhaled long and slow. "It's Vanessa. She's pregnant." I waited. "We weren't planning this," he continued, the words rushing out now. "We were going to wait until after the wedding, get settled first. But it happened, and now we're dealing with it, and there's a situation." "What kind of situation?" "Her family. They're traditional, conservative. They're upset about the pregnancy before marriage, and there's been some tension about the wedding timeline. We're trying to move everything up, plan something smaller and faster, but Vanessa's mother is involved and it's becoming complicated." I glanced at the clock on my dashboard. I had 20 minutes before my next appointment. "I'm sorry to hear that, but I'm not sure why you're calling me." "Because I need your help." The words came out flat, matter of fact, as if it were the most reasonable request in the world. "My help with what?" "With Vanessa. She's having a hard time with all of this. The pregnancy, the family pressure, planning a wedding in 6 weeks. She's stressed, and I'm worried about her. I thought maybe you could talk to her, help her navigate some of this. You were always good at that kind of thing. Emotional support, family dynamics." I sat very still, my breath coming in slow and even. On Tuckasegee Road, traffic moved past in both directions. A woman walked 2 small children down the sidewalk. The afternoon sun beat down on my windshield, and inside my car, the air conditioning hummed. "You want me to provide emotional support to your pregnant fiancé?" "I know how it sounds." he said quickly, "but you're a professional social worker, Kiara. You deal with family stress and relationship issues all the time. And you know me. You know how I can be sometimes. I thought having another woman to talk to, someone who's been through wedding planning, someone who understands the pressure, someone who used to be married to you." He paused. "Someone mature enough to help despite our history." I let the silence stretch out between us, long enough that I heard him shift position, heard what might have been Vanessa's voice in the background asking who he was talking to. "I can't help you with this," I said finally. "Kiara, please. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. Vanessa really needs support right now, and I don't know who else to turn to. Your expertise?" "My expertise is for my clients. Your fiancé is not my client. I could pay you. Professional consultation, whatever you want to call it. I know your time is valuable." Something cold moved through my chest, settling somewhere behind my ribs. This conversation is over. Wait, don't hang up. Just think about it. I'm not asking for anything crazy, just maybe one conversation. I ended the call. For a full minute, I sat in my car on Tuckasegee Road staring at my phone. Then I blocked his number, gathered my laptop and files, and went to my next appointment. That night, lying in bed in my house in Noda, I thought about what it meant that he'd called me. Not what he'd asked for. I'd understood that immediately. The presumption that I would be available, helpful, willing to smooth over the complications in his new life. But what it revealed about how he saw me. I was a resource, a tool he could access when convenient. The fact that he'd once promised to love me, honor me, build a life with me, that was irrelevant to his current need. I was useful, and therefore I should be grateful to be asked. The assumption itself was breathtaking. I didn't respond to it with anger. Anger would have suggested I still cared enough to be hurt. Instead, I felt something closer to clarity, a crystallization of understanding about exactly who he was and exactly who I would not be for him. I would not be available. I would not be reasonable. I would not help him build his new life on the foundation of my dismissed past. I made myself a promise in the dark of my bedroom. Whatever came next, I would protect myself first. I would not be convenient. I would not be the person he called when his new life developed cracks. I would be absent. 2 weeks passed before he tried again. This time, it was an email to my work address, which meant he'd looked up my contact information at Mecklenburg County DSS. The subject line read, "Following up," and the message was brief. "Kiara, I understand if you need time to think about my request. I want you to know that I respect your professional boundaries. However, the situation has become more urgent. Vanessa is experiencing severe pregnancy complications, and her doctor has put her on partial bed rest. The stress is affecting both her and the baby. I'm asking you as someone who once cared about me to reconsider. This isn't about us. This is about helping someone who's struggling. Please call me." I read it twice, then forwarded it to my personal email and deleted it from my work account. Then I blocked his work email address. That evening, my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. The message was Vanessa. Her voice was young, uncertain, nothing like the confident woman I'd seen at the Morrison wedding. "Hi, Kiara? This is Vanessa, your ex-husband's fiancé. I hope it's okay that I'm calling you. He gave me your number. I know this is probably weird, but I really could use someone to talk to, and he said you were really understanding and good with family stuff. I'm just having a hard time with everything right now, and I don't really have anyone who gets it. Could you maybe call me back? Just to talk?" I saved the voicemail but didn't return the call. The requests kept coming, each one slightly different, each one revealing the assumption that eventually I would relent, that I was too kind, too professional, too mature to maintain boundaries when someone was genuinely struggling. 3 days after Vanessa's voicemail, I received a text from his mother, Diane. We'd maintained a cordial relationship after the divorce. She'd always been kind to me, and I genuinely liked her. The text was careful, respectful. Kiara, sweetheart, your ex-husband told me he reached out to you about Vanessa. I know that must have felt strange. I want you to know I didn't put him up to it. But if you felt comfortable talking to her, just woman to woman, I think it would mean a lot. She's very young and doesn't have much family support. No pressure, of course. Hope you're doing well. I responded simply, thank you for thinking of me, Diane. I hope Vanessa has the support she needs. Take care. Diane's response came quickly. I understand. You're a good woman, Kiara. He was lucky to have you. I didn't reply to that. A week after that, I saw him at the Harris Teeter in Plaza Midwood. I was buying groceries after work, moving through the produce section, when I looked up and saw him standing near the tomatoes. He looked worse than I'd ever seen him. His shirt was wrinkled, his tie loosened, dark circles under his eyes. When he saw me, something crossed his face. Relief, desperation, something that made him move toward me immediately. Kiara, please, just 5 minutes. I continued selecting apples, placing them carefully in a bag. We don't have anything to discuss. Vanessa's in the hospital. They're monitoring the baby. She's only 24 weeks along and there are complications with her blood pressure. The doctors are worried about preeclampsia. I placed the bag of apples in my cart. I'm sorry to hear that. She needs support, real support, not just me trying to figure out what to say. You have experience with this kind of crisis, with helping people through difficult situations. I help my clients through difficult situations. Your fiancé is not my client. I'm begging you. His voice cracked slightly. I know I hurt you. I know I said things at that wedding that were dismissive and wrong, but this isn't about me. This is about a 27-year-old woman who's terrified she might lose her baby. I looked at him fully for the first time. You told your friends I was a young mistake. He flinched. I shouldn't have said that. You told me Vanessa was exactly what you needed because she could be a real partner in your world, implying that I couldn't. Kiara, you spent 5 years building a life with me, then spent the next 3 years erasing me from your history. And now you want me to help you because suddenly you need something I can provide. I was an asshole. I know that. But please don't let my mistakes affect Vanessa. She didn't do anything wrong. I pushed my cart forward, moving past him toward the dairy section. I hope everything works out for your family. I really do, but I can't help you. He didn't follow me, though I heard him call my name once more before I turned the corner. I finished my shopping, checked out, drove home, and put away my groceries in the quiet of my kitchen. That night, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line was "Please," and when I opened it, I found a message from Vanessa. I know you don't know me, and you don't owe me anything. Your ex-husband told me what he said at the wedding, and I understand why you wouldn't want to help us. But I'm really scared right now. The doctors keep using words like high risk and complications, and I don't have a mother I can call about this. My mom and I haven't spoken since she found out about the pregnancy. I don't have sisters. I don't really have close friends here because we moved to Charlotte for his job. I'm in the hospital alone most of the time because he has to work, and I'm just scared. I'm not asking you to forgive him or forget what he said. I'm just asking if you could maybe talk to me once, just to tell me what to expect, what questions to ask the doctors, how to get through this. Please. I read the email 3 times. Then I closed my laptop and went to bed. For 2 days, I didn't respond. I went to work, managed my caseload, came home, lived my life. I thought about Vanessa in that hospital room, 27 years old and scared. I thought about the version of myself at 23, newly married, believing that love and commitment meant you'd never face anything alone. I thought about all the ways he had made me feel small, insufficient, forgettable. And I thought about the fact that none of this was my responsibility. But I also thought about something else, something I'd learned in 8 years of social work. Sometimes the person asking for help isn't the person who needs it most. Sometimes helping means recognizing what help looks like and what it doesn't. Vanessa needed support. That was real and legitimate. But she didn't need it from me. She needed it from professionals who weren't entangled in her fiancé's history. She needed it from people who could provide objective care without the complicated weight of being the woman he'd replaced. She needed the hospital's resources, support groups, trained counselors who specialized in high-risk pregnancies. What she didn't need was to be the reason I made myself available to someone who'd already demonstrated exactly how much my availability was worth to him. On the third day, I sent a brief response. Vanessa, I recommend reaching out to the hospital's social work department. They can connect you with resources, support groups, and counseling services specifically for high-risk pregnancies. They're trained for exactly this kind of situation. I wish you and your baby all the best. Professional, distant, final. She didn't respond, and I didn't expect her to. What I didn't expect was the way my refusal would ripple through Charlotte's tight-knit professional circles. Sharon called me 3 days after I'd sent Vanessa the email. "People are talking," she said without preamble. I was at my desk at DSS reviewing case files. About what? About you and your ex-husband, about how he asked you to help his fiancée and you said no. I set down my pen. How do people know about that? His mother mentioned it to someone at church, said she understood your position but thought it was a shame you couldn't put the past aside to help someone in need. It got around. I leaned back in my chair, staring at my office ceiling. What are people saying? Sharon hesitated. It depends on who you ask. Some people think you're being cold. Some people think you're protecting yourself. Most people are just interested because it's drama and this is Charlotte. What do you think? I think you did exactly what you should have done. He doesn't get to decide when you're available. We talked for a few more minutes, then hung up. But Sharon's call stayed with me, the knowledge that my absence had become visible enough to generate conversation. Over the next few weeks, I noticed shifts in how certain people interacted with me. Some were subtle, a slightly cooler greeting at professional events, a conversation that ended when I approached. Others were more obvious. A woman I knew from a nonprofit board made a pointed comment about the importance of compassion in our field, looking directly at me while she said it. But there were other shifts too, shifts I hadn't anticipated. A colleague at DSS pulled me aside after a staff meeting and said quietly, "I heard what happened with your ex. Good for you for having boundaries. Too many of us would have caved." A woman I'd worked with on a difficult custody case years ago sent me a text. "Heard you told your ex to handle his own mess. Respect." At a fundraiser in July, 3 different people, all women, all professionals I knew casually, made a point of telling me they admired my work, my integrity, my commitment to my clients. The subtext was clear. They knew what had happened, and they approved of my choice. Charlotte's Black professional community was small enough that information traveled, but it was also sophisticated enough to understand nuance. The story wasn't just Kiara refused to help, it was Kiara refused to be convenient. And for every person who thought I should have been more compassionate, there were others who recognized what I'd actually done, protected myself from being used by someone who'd already used me once. The narrative was splitting, and I was learning something important. I couldn't control what people thought of me, but I could control whether I compromised myself to manage their opinions. I chose not to compromise. In August, I was invited to speak at a conference in Atlanta about ethical boundaries in social work practice. The invitation came from a woman who'd heard my presentation in Raleigh and wanted me to expand on some of the themes for a national audience. I accepted. The conference was large, over 500 attendees from across the Southeast. My session was on the second day, and the room was full. I talked about the importance of maintaining professional boundaries, about recognizing when helping becomes enabling, about the difference between compassion and availability. I didn't mention my ex-husband. I didn't need to. But afterward, during the networking reception, a woman approached me and said something that made everything click into place. She was a director of social services in Birmingham, maybe 50 years old with kind eyes and a direct manner. "That session was personal for you," she said. I started to deflect, but she held up a hand. I'm not asking you to confirm it. I'm just saying I recognized it. The way you talked about boundaries, that comes from experience, not theory. And I want you to know that what you said in there is going to help a lot of people protect themselves from situations they think they should handle, but shouldn't. She handed me her card. If you're ever interested in consulting work in Alabama, call me. We need people who understand that helping others doesn't mean sacrificing yourself. I took the card and thanked her. On the flight back to Charlotte, I thought about what she'd said, about how my refusal to help my ex-husband had taught me something I could teach others, about how protecting myself had become a kind of expertise, about how absence could be its own form of presence. The baby was born in August, 6 weeks premature but healthy enough to go home after 2 weeks in the NICU. I learned this from Sharon, who'd heard it through the Charlotte Professional Network that connected all of us, whether we wanted it to or not. They named her Kennedy. My ex-husband posted about it on LinkedIn with a professional photo and a caption about new beginnings and blessings. I didn't congratulate him. In September, I saw Diane at a Lynx meeting. She hugged me, asked about my work, told me I looked well. We didn't discuss her son or Vanessa or baby Kennedy. It was a relief to both of us. In October, he sent me a friend request on Facebook. I deleted it. In November, Vanessa sent me a message on Instagram with a photo of Kennedy and a long caption about how grateful she was for the hospital social workers I'd recommended, how they'd helped her through those difficult weeks, how Kennedy was thriving now. She thanked me for my kindness. I didn't respond. Winter came, and with it, the holiday season that always brought Charlotte's Black professional community together for various events and gatherings. I attended most of them: a fundraiser for the Harvey B. Gant Center, a Jack and Jill holiday party, a scholarship dinner for Johnson C. Smith students. I wore my good dresses, made conversation, donated what I could afford, and maintained my place in the community I'd built for myself. At the scholarship dinner in early December, I was standing near the silent auction tables when he approached me. He was alone. No Vanessa, though I'd seen her earlier near the coat check with Kennedy in a carrier. "Kiara," he said, and his voice was careful, respectful in a way it hadn't been at the grocery store. "I wanted to thank you." I looked at him, my face neutral. For what? For recommending the hospital's social workers to Vanessa. They really helped her through a difficult time. She said you were very professional about it. I'm glad she got the support she needed. He nodded, shifting his weight in that familiar gesture of discomfort. I also wanted to apologize for everything I said at the Morrison wedding, for the way I reached out to you when Vanessa was struggling. I was out of line. Yes, you were. He seemed surprised by my directness, but he recovered quickly. I'd like to make it right. If there's anything I can do, there's nothing you can do. We're divorced. We've been divorced for years. You have a new life, a new family. I have my own life. We don't need to make anything right. We just need to stay out of each other's way. I understand, but no buts. I'm not interested in redemption arcs or closure or whatever you think this conversation is going to accomplish. You made choices. I made choices. We both moved on. That's the end of the story. He studied my face, looking for something. Anger, maybe, or hurt, or some crack in my composure that would give him an opening. But I'd spent 3 years rebuilding myself into someone who didn't give people like him what they were looking for. All right, he said finally. I respect that. Good. He started to walk away, then turned back. For what it's worth, you were never a mistake. I was young and stupid, and I said things I shouldn't have said. You deserved better than that. I smiled, small and cold. I know. Then I turned back to the silent auction, examining a weekend getaway package to Asheville, and he was gone. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Sharon. Did you hear about your ex-husband and Vanessa? There's drama. Call me. I made coffee first, sat at my kitchen table with my phone, and called her back. What happened? Custody issues, Sharon said, her voice tight with the kind of gossip that spreads fast through close communities. Apparently, Vanessa's threatening to move back to Colombia with Kennedy. She and your ex are having serious problems. My cousin works with someone in his department, and apparently he's been a mess at work for weeks. I sip my coffee, looking out my kitchen window at my small yard, the bare trees of December. That's unfortunate. Kiara, he's gonna call you again. Probably. What are you gonna do? I thought about it for a moment. About him at the Morrison wedding, reducing our marriage to a mistake. About his phone calls and emails and grocery store confrontation. About the way he'd tried to use me as a resource when his new life started showing cracks. About the way I'd refused every single time to be available. Nothing, I said. I'm going to do absolutely nothing. Good, Sharon said firmly. He made his choices. We talked for a few more minutes about other things. Her daughter's college acceptances, upcoming Lynx events, a new restaurant in South End we wanted to try. Then we hung up and I finished my coffee in the quiet of my house. The call came 2 days later. I was at work finishing up documentation on a difficult case when my office phone rang. The receptionist said someone was in the lobby asking to see me, wouldn't give a name, said it was urgent and personal. I knew before I went down there. He was standing near the reception desk in his work suit, looking like he'd come straight from the office. His tie was askew, his expression desperate. When he saw me, he stepped forward immediately. Kiara, I need help. I stayed where I was, keeping the reception desk between us. You need to leave. This is my workplace. Vanessa's leaving me. She's taking Kennedy back to Colombia to live with her mother. I'm trying to work out a custody arrangement, but she's not being reasonable, and her mother is poisoning everything. I need help navigating this. You understand family systems, custody issues? You need to leave right now or I'm calling security. Please, just listen. I know I don't deserve your help, but Kennedy deserves a father. I'm trying to do right by my daughter, and I don't know how to handle this kind of situation. You work with this stuff every day. I picked up the reception desk phone. I'm calling security. Kiara, you have 30 seconds to leave this building. He stared at me, and I watched something shift in his face. The final understanding that I meant every word I was saying, that there would be no softening, no reconsideration, no moment where I set aside my boundaries to help him. I was wrong about you, he said quietly. You're cold. I held the phone, my finger over the security button. I'm unavailable. There's a difference. He left. I stood at the reception desk for a full minute after the elevator doors closed behind him, breathing slowly, deliberately. Then I thanked the receptionist, went back to my office, and finished my documentation. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't know because he'd stopped being entitled to that information years ago, was that his appearance at my workplace had consequences beyond his understanding. The receptionist who'd witnessed the exchange was a woman named Patricia, mid-50s, who'd worked at DSS for 20 years. She was also a deacon at a church in West Charlotte that happened to share community connections with Friendship Missionary Baptist, where my ex-husband's mother still attended services. Patricia didn't gossip maliciously. She just mentioned to her sister, who mentioned to a friend, who happened to be in Diane's Bible study group, that Kiara Thompson had to call security on her ex-husband when he showed up at her workplace demanding help. The story traveled the way stories do in interconnected communities, not as scandal, but as information that helped people understand the true shape of things. Within a week, Diane knew. Within 2 weeks, several people at my ex-husband's church knew. Within a month, the narrative that I was cold for refusing to help had been complicated by the understanding that he'd become desperate enough to ambush me at my workplace. People started asking questions. What kind of man does that? What was he thinking? Why would he assume she'd help after everything? The story wasn't about my refusal anymore. It was about his presumption, and that distinction mattered. That evening, I received an email from an attorney's office, his attorney, representing him in his custody dispute with Vanessa. The email was professional, requesting my professional opinion as a licensed social worker, familiar with family dynamics and child welfare issues. They offered compensation for my time and expertise. I deleted it. 2 days later, a different attorney emailed me, Vanessa's attorney this time, making a similar request from the other side of the custody dispute. I deleted that too. He tried calling from different numbers. I blocked them all. Diane sent me a text asking if I'd talk to him, just to give him some perspective on handling the custody situation in a healthy way. I responded, "I appreciate your concern, Diane, but I can't help with this. I hope you all find a good resolution." Her response came an hour later. "I understand, sweetheart. I'm sorry he put you in that position. You've always been gracious, and I want you to know that some of us see it." I saved that message. Christmas came and went. I spent it with my own family in Durham, my mother, my sister, and her husband, my niece and nephew. We cooked together, exchanged gifts, went to Christmas Eve service at my mother's church. Nobody mentioned my ex-husband. Nobody asked if I was seeing anyone or when I was going to settle down again. They just loved me exactly as I was, which was all I'd ever wanted. New Year's Eve, I went to a party at a friend's house in Dilworth. It was small, intimate, just 20 people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. We played games, told stories, counted down to midnight with champagne that cost $8 a bottle and tasted perfect anyway. At 12:02, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Happy New Year, Kiara. I'm sorry for everything. I hope you find happiness." It was him, trying one more time from yet another number. I deleted it without responding and went back to the party. January brought clarity in unexpected ways. I was promoted to program supervisor at DSS, a position I'd been working toward for 2 years. It came with a salary increase, more responsibility, and the opportunity to mentor newer case managers. I accepted it with pride, knowing I'd earned it through years of difficult work and dedication to families who desperately needed advocacy. The promotion was announced in a staff meeting, and afterward, my supervisor pulled me aside. "You've built something remarkable here," she said. "Your reputation extends beyond this department. People trust you because you're consistent, ethical, and you don't compromise your principles. That matters more than you know." I thanked her, but her words stayed with me. "Your reputation extends beyond this department." I was learning that reputation was a strange thing, not what you tried to build, but what you built anyway through the accumulation of choices that revealed who you actually were. I also started dating someone, Leonard, a high school principal I'd met through a professional development conference. He was kind, stable, emotionally intelligent. We took things slowly, enjoying dinners and long conversations about education policy and social justice, and the books we were both reading. He never pushed for more than I was ready to give, and I found myself relaxing into something that felt healthy and reciprocal. Leonard knew about my ex-husband, not every detail, but enough. I'd told him about the divorce, about the Morrison wedding comment, about the requests for help I'd declined. He'd listened without judgment, then said something that surprised me. "It sounds like he's still trying to write your story. Good for you for refusing to be a character in it." In February, I ran into Vanessa at Target. She was alone, pushing Kennedy in a cart through the baby section. Kennedy was bigger now, almost 6 months old, wearing a pink onesie with elephants on it. Vanessa looked tired but put together, her hair in a neat ponytail, her expression focused on the diapers she was comparing. I could have turned around, avoided the entire interaction, but something made me continue down the aisle, and when Vanessa looked up and saw me, her face went through several expressions before settling on something that looked like resignation. "Kiara, hi?" "Hello, Vanessa." Kennedy made a gurgling sound, waving her small fists. Vanessa adjusted her in the cart, her movements automatic, practiced. "I'm back in Charlotte. We're trying to work things out." "I hope that goes well for you." She nodded, her eyes searching my face for something. "I know you didn't help us when we asked. I understand why. But I wanted you to know that I don't blame you." "I appreciate that." "He told me what he said about you at that wedding, the mistake comment. It was a terrible thing to say." I said nothing, just waited. "I think he knows that now," she continued. "He's been different lately. Humbler, I guess. This whole custody scare really shook him." I imagine it would. She shifted Kennedy again, and the baby reached for a package of diapers with determined focus. "I just wanted to say that I think you were right to protect yourself. You didn't owe us anything. I'm sorry he made you feel like you did." I looked at her. This young woman who'd been part of the narrative he had written to replace me, who'd also discovered that narratives shift when reality gets complicated. "I hope you and Kennedy are well," I said simply. "We're managing, one day at a time." I nodded and moved past her, continuing my own shopping. Behind me, I heard her talking softly to Kennedy, and then I turned the corner and they were gone. That night, I told Leonard about the encounter over dinner at a Thai restaurant in Plaza Midwood. He listened carefully, asked thoughtful questions, never once tried to fix anything or tell me how I should feel about it. "You handled that with grace," he said finally. "I handled it with boundaries," I corrected. "Grace is optional. Boundaries are survival." He smiled, reaching across the table to take my hand. "I'm learning that from you." March brought spring to Charlotte, and with it the social season that always kept my calendar full. I attended a Lynx luncheon, a scholarship fundraiser, a gallery opening at the Gantz Center. I saw my ex-husband at 2 of these events, always from a distance, always with Vanessa beside him. We didn't speak. We didn't acknowledge each other. We existed in the same community spaces, like 2 people who'd once known each other briefly and had nothing left to say. At the scholarship fundraiser, I overheard part of a conversation he was having with Judge Morrison. They were talking about custody arrangements, about the challenges of co-parenting, about his commitment to being present for his daughter despite the complications with Vanessa's family. "It's been humbling," he was saying, "learning that you can't control everything, that you have to accept help when people offer it and accept silence when they don't." Judge Morrison said something I couldn't hear, and my ex-husband laughed, a sound that held no humor, just acknowledgement of some truth he'd learned the hard way. I moved to a different part of the room and didn't think about it again, but something was building that I wouldn't understand until later, a shift in how the Charlotte professional community was positioning me and positioning him. It wasn't dramatic or obvious, it was accumulative, the result of 100 small interactions over months. In April, I was asked to serve on a city task force examining child welfare reform. The appointment came from the mayor's office, and it was significant. 12 people selected from across the nonprofit, legal, and social services sectors to make recommendations that would shape policy. At the first meeting, I recognized several people, including 2 attorneys who'd worked on cases with me and a woman who directed a foster care advocacy organization. The chair of the task force introduced everyone, and when she got to me, she said, "Kiara Thompson, program supervisor at DSS, and one of the most respected voices in family services in this city." One of the most respected voices. I felt the weight of that description, not because I'd sought it, but because I'd earned it through work that had nothing to do with anyone I used to be married to. After the meeting, one of the attorneys approached me. "I'm glad you're on this task force," she said. "We need people who understand that doing the right thing isn't always the comfortable thing." I thanked her, but I noticed the way she looked at me when she said it, like she knew something beyond what we were discussing. Later, I would learn that she'd been approached by my ex-husband's attorney months ago, asked to provide a professional reference about my expertise for his custody case. She'd declined, citing conflict of interest, but the request itself had told her something about what he was trying to do. Use me, even in my absence. The word had spread quietly among the family law community. He was trying to leverage my professional reputation without my consent. It was subtle enough to be technically legal, but ethically questionable in ways that people in that world noticed, and they remembered. Leonard asked me if I wanted to meet his daughter, who was coming home from college for the summer. I said yes, and the 3 of us had dinner at his house in Cotswold. His daughter, Jasmine, was smart and funny and studying engineering at Howard. She asked me about my work, and I found myself telling her about some of the families I'd helped, the small victories that made the difficult days worthwhile. "You really care about people," Jasmine said at one point, and Leonard smiled at me across the table in a way that made something warm settle in my chest. Later, helping Leonard clean up the kitchen while Jasmine caught up with friends in the living room, he said quietly, "Thank you for being here, for being yourself, for not pretending to be anything you're not." I looked at him, this good man who saw me clearly and didn't need me to be smaller or bigger or different than I was. "Thank you for seeing me," I said. He kissed my forehead and we finished the dishes in comfortable silence. May brought unexpected news through Sharon again. She called me on a Saturday morning, her voice excited. "Your ex-husband and Vanessa are getting married. Quick courthouse thing next week, just immediate family. Apparently they decided to simplify everything, focus on co-parenting and stability for Kennedy." "Good for them," I said, and I meant it. "You okay?" "I'm great, actually. Leonard and I are going hiking in the mountains next weekend." Sharon laughed. "Look at you, moving on with a whole healthy relationship and everything." "It's revolutionary," I agreed. We talked for a while longer, then hung up, and I went about my Saturday. Farmer's market, cleaning my house, reading on my back porch in the warm spring air. My phone stayed quiet. No calls from my ex-husband, no emails from attorneys, no messages asking for help or understanding or forgiveness. Just silence, which was exactly what I'd chosen. But the silence carried weight now, consequences that reached beyond my personal boundaries. In June, I received an invitation to Judge Morrison's retirement party. It was a major event. The judge had served on the bench for 30 years and was respected throughout Charlotte's legal and civic community. The party would be at the same Ritz-Carlton where I'd first heard my ex-husband call me a mistake. I RSVP'd yes and bought a new dress for the occasion. The night of the party, I arrived with Leonard, and we moved through the elegant ballroom together, making conversation with people I knew and people I was meeting for the first time. Leonard was good at these events, comfortable in his own skin, genuinely interested in the people around him. We were standing near the bar talking to Michelle from my old table at the Morrison wedding when I saw my ex-husband across the room. He was with Vanessa, both of them dressed formally, both of them looking more settled than I'd seen them in months. Kennedy wasn't with them, probably with a babysitter. They were talking to some senior partners from his firm, and Vanessa was laughing at something one of them had said. My ex-husband looked up and saw me. Our eyes met across the crowded room, and I watched him register my presence, register Leonard beside me, register the way Leonard's hand rested comfortably on my lower back. I didn't look away. I didn't smile or nod or acknowledge him beyond that moment of eye contact. I simply held his gaze for 3 seconds, then turned back to my conversation with Leonard and Michelle as if nothing had happened. Later, standing in the coat check line, that same line where this had all started 2 years ago, Leonard asked me if I was all right. "I'm perfect," I said, and it was true. My ex-husband approached us while we were waiting. He had Vanessa with him, and they both looked nervous in a way that would have satisfied me once, but now just seemed unnecessary. "Kiara," he said carefully, "I wanted to introduce you to my wife. Properly, I mean. Vanessa, this is Kiara. Kiara, this is my wife, Vanessa." I shook Vanessa's hand, my grip firm and brief. "Congratulations on your marriage." "Thank you," Vanessa said softly. He gestured to Leonard. "And this is?" "Leonard Harris," Leonard said, extending his hand. "Principal at West Charlotte High. Nice to meet you." They shook hands, exchanged pleasantries. The coat check girl found our wraps. The 4 of us stood in that small space, and I could feel my ex-husband trying to find words for something. An apology, maybe, or an explanation, or some final attempt at connection. "Kiara," he started, "I just wanted to say—" "It was good seeing you both," I interrupted gently. "I hope everything works out well for your family." Leonard helped me with my wrap, and we walked toward the exit. Behind us, I heard Vanessa say something to him, but I didn't turn around to see his response. Outside, the June night was warm and clear. Downtown Charlotte alive with lights and movement. Leonard called for our car, and while we waited, he put his arm around my shoulders and I leaned into him, comfortable and certain. "That was your ex-husband," Leonard said quietly. It wasn't a question. Yes. He looked like he had more to say. I know. You didn't want to hear it. I thought about that for a moment, watching the valet bring our car around. I didn't need to hear it. Whatever he wanted to say, it was for him, not for me. And I'm done being available for things that aren't for me. Leonard kissed the top of my head. You're remarkable, you know that? The valet opened our doors, and we drove away from the Ritz-Carlton, away from my ex-husband and Vanessa and the history I'd spent years rebuilding myself from. Leonard held my hand across the console, and we talked about his plans for the upcoming school year, about a vacation we wanted to take in August, about ordinary beautiful things that had nothing to do with the past. When we got back to my house in Noda, Leonard walked me to my door like he always did, kissed me goodnight like he always did, and asked if I wanted him to stay. Yes, I said, and meant it. Inside my house that I'd bought with my own money, furnished with my own choices, filled with my own life, we made coffee and sat on my couch and talked until midnight about nothing and everything. My phone stayed silent on the kitchen counter. No calls, no texts, no emails asking for help or offering apologies or trying to rewrite our history one more time. Just the life I'd built from the pieces he'd left me with, transformed into something whole and mine and completely unavailable to him. But the story wasn't finished yet. The final act was still coming, and it would arrive in September in a way I couldn't have anticipated. The call came from Judge Morrison himself on a Tuesday afternoon while I was in a staff meeting at DSS. I saw his name on my phone screen and excused myself to take it. "Kiara, I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time," the judge said in his warm, authoritative voice. "Not at all, Your Honor. How can I help you?" "I'm calling because I've been asked to recommend someone for a significant position, and your name keeps coming up. The Charlotte Mecklenburg Family Justice Center is looking for a new executive director. The board wants someone with frontline experience, someone respected across multiple sectors, someone who understands both the policy side and the human side of family services. I'd like to recommend you." I stopped walking, standing in the hallway outside the conference room. "I'm honored, Your Honor, but I should mention I don't have executive director experience." Neither did the last 3 people who held that position when they started. What you have is something more valuable: integrity, expertise, and the kind of reputation that makes people trust you before you even walk in the room. The board is meeting next week to review candidates. Would you be interested in being considered? I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. Yes, I would. Excellent. I'll submit your name. Expect a call from the board chair within a few days. We hung up, and I stood in that hallway feeling the weight of what he'd just offered me. The Family Justice Center was a major organization, a partnership between law enforcement, legal services, healthcare, and social services that provided comprehensive support for families in crisis. The executive director position was high profile, well compensated, and influential in ways that would expand my impact far beyond individual cases. It was also the kind of position that would make me visible in ways I'd never been before. The board chair called 3 days later. Her name was Dr. Patricia Williams, and she was a professor at UNC Charlotte and a nationally recognized expert on family violence prevention. We talked for 90 minutes about my experience, my vision for the center, my approach to building partnerships across different sectors. At the end of the call, she said, "I'm going to be direct with you. You're one of 3 finalists. The board will make a decision after we've interviewed everyone. But I want you to know that Judge Morrison's recommendation carried significant weight, and several other people we consulted spoke very highly of you. Your reputation precedes you in the best possible way." "I appreciate that," I said. "There is one thing I should mention. Dr. Williams continued, her tone shifting slightly. One of the other finalists is someone you might know, a consultant who's been working with several family service organizations in the region. I won't name them now, but I wanted to give you advance notice in case there's any potential conflict. Something in her tone told me exactly who the other finalist was before she said anything more. "Thank you for the heads up," I said carefully. 2 weeks later, I arrived at the Family Justice Center for my formal interview. The center occupied a renovated building in East Charlotte, designed to be welcoming and accessible. The board consisted of 12 people: attorneys, social workers, healthcare administrators, law enforcement representatives, and community leaders. I walked into the conference room and saw them arranged around a long table, and sitting at the far end in a guest chair against the wall was my ex-husband. He was there as a consultant, presenting his proposal before my interview. We made eye contact for half a second, and I watched his expression shift from surprise to something else. Discomfort, maybe, or the realization that we were now competing for the same position of influence. Dr. Williams stood and greeted me warmly. "Kiara, thank you for coming. Please have a seat. We're just wrapping up our previous presentation, and then we'll begin your interview." I sat, placed my portfolio on the table, and waited. My ex-husband finished his presentation, something about integrated data systems and cross-sector collaboration frameworks. It was polished, professional, exactly the kind of consultant speak I'd heard him practice 100 times during our marriage. The board asked questions, he answered them confidently, and then Dr. Williams thanked him for his time. He stood, gathered his materials, and walked past me toward the door. As he passed, he leaned down slightly and said quietly, "Good luck." I didn't respond. The door closed behind him, and the interview began. For 90 minutes, the board asked me about everything: my experience managing complex cases, my approach to staff development, my vision for expanding the center's reach, my strategies for maintaining funding in a competitive environment. I answered each question directly, drawing on years of frontline work and recent leadership experience. But the question that mattered most came from a woman named Carolyn, a family court judge who'd been on the board for 6 years. "Kiara, part of this role involves making difficult decisions about who we can and can't help, where we invest our limited resources, how we maintain boundaries while still being compassionate. Can you talk about a time when you had to make a decision that felt personally difficult but was professionally necessary?" I could have given any number of examples from my caseload. Instead, I told the truth. Earlier this year, my ex-husband asked me to provide support to his fiancée during a high-risk pregnancy. He framed it as a professional request. She needed someone who understood family systems and crisis intervention. But what he was really asking was for me to make myself available to help him navigate complications in his new life, using our past relationship as leverage. The room was completely silent. I said no, I continued. Not because I lacked compassion for his fiancée, but because helping her would have required me to compromise my own boundaries and potentially my professional ethics. I directed her to appropriate resources, the hospital's social work department, which was better equipped to provide objective support. It was the right decision professionally, but it wasn't easy personally, especially in a community this small where people talk. Caroline nodded slowly. "How did you handle the aftermath? The community response?" I maintained my boundaries. I didn't defend my decision publicly, but I didn't apologize for it either. I trusted that the people who mattered would understand the distinction between refusing to help and refusing to be used, and I accepted that some people wouldn't understand, and that was their right. Another board member, a man named Thomas who ran a domestic violence shelter, leaned forward. "That takes remarkable clarity. In this field, we're often pressured to help everyone all the time, regardless of the cost to ourselves. But sustainability requires boundaries." "Exactly," I said, "and I think that's especially important for an organization like this center. We're here to help families in crisis, but we can't do that effectively if we're not clear about our role, our capacity, and our limitations." The interview continued for another 30 minutes, but I could feel the shift in the room, the way they were looking at me differently now, as someone who demonstrated in real time the kind of ethical clarity they needed. When it ended, Dr. Williams walked me to the door. "Thank you for your honesty in there. That question about your ex-husband, Caroline knew about the situation already. Charlotte's legal community is small. She wanted to see how you'd handle being asked about it directly." I nodded. "I understand." "For what it's worth, your answer was exactly what we needed to hear." The decision came 2 weeks later, on a Friday afternoon in late October. Dr. Williams called me personally. "Kiara, the board voted unanimously. We'd like to offer you the position of Executive Director of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Family Justice Center." I accepted. The announcement went out the following Monday through a press release and community notification. Within hours, my phone started buzzing with congratulations, from colleagues at DSS, from people I'd worked with on various boards and committees, from friends and family. Leonard took me to dinner that night at a nice restaurant in Dilworth. He raised his glass and said, "To the woman who refused to be convenient and became indispensable instead." I laughed, but the toast stayed with me. Sharon called the next morning. "Have you checked the Charlotte Post?" "No, why?" "There's an article about your appointment. It mentions that you were selected over several other candidates, including a prominent consultant. No names, but people will know. How do you feel about that?" I thought about it. I feel like I earned it. Damn right you did. What I didn't tell Sharon, what I didn't tell anyone, was that my ex-husband had sent me an email that morning. It was brief. "Congratulations on the appointment. You deserved it." I deleted it without responding. The transition into the executive director role took 3 months. I gave proper notice at DSS, worked with my successor to ensure continuity for my clients, and started at the Family Justice Center in January. The work was demanding and meaningful in ways I'd hoped for. I supervised a staff of 35 people across multiple programs, managed a budget of several $millions, represented the center in meetings with city officials and foundation funders. I built partnerships with organizations across the region and developed new programs to fill gaps in services. And I was good at it. By spring, the center's reach had expanded significantly. We'd secured 2 major grants, launched a new legal advocacy program, and increased our capacity to serve families by 30%. The local media covered our work regularly, and I did interviews about family justice issues for television and print. My name became associated with expertise, leadership, and ethical practice. Leonard and I got engaged in April at his house in Cotswold on a Saturday afternoon. It was quiet, just the 2 of us, and when he asked me, I said yes without hesitation. We set the date for September at a small venue in Davidson with just 80 guests, family, close friends, people who'd been part of our journey. The invitations went out in June. I did not invite my ex-husband. I did not invite Vanessa. I did not invite Diane, though I thought about it. What I did instead was something more deliberate. I invited Judge Morrison. I invited Dr. Williams and several other members of the Family Justice Center board. I invited colleagues from DSS and partners from organizations across Charlotte. I invited the family court judge who'd asked me about boundaries during my interview. I invited the people who'd witnessed my work, my growth, my choices. And in September, on a Saturday afternoon in Davidson, I married Leonard in front of 80 people who knew exactly who I was. The ceremony was simple and elegant. My sister was my maid of honor. Leonard's daughter was a bridesmaid. My niece and nephew were in the wedding party. My mother cried, but this time with joy that was uncomplicated by any undercurrent of concern. During the reception, Judge Morrison pulled me aside. "I'm proud of you, Kiara. Not just for what you've accomplished professionally, but for how you've handled yourself through everything. That kind of integrity is rare." "Thank you, Your Honor. That means a great deal." He smiled. "I heard your ex-husband's consulting contract with the city wasn't renewed. Apparently, there were some questions about his approach to client boundaries. Nothing actionable, just enough to make people hesitate. I said nothing, but I understood what he was telling me. Reputations are built slowly, over years, through accumulated choices, and they're damaged the same way, not through single dramatic failures, but through patterns that make people quietly hesitate. My ex-husband had demonstrated a pattern, and Charlotte's professional community, which noticed everything, had noticed that too. "I wish him well," I said finally. "I'm sure you do," Judge Morrison said, and the way he said it suggested he understood exactly what that generosity cost and exactly what it signified. Leonard and I danced, cut the cake, toasted with our guests. We left in a shower of flower petals and drove to the airport for our honeymoon in Barbados. My phone stayed off for 2 weeks. When we returned, tanned and relaxed and deeply happy, I found a message from Diane. It was voicemail, left 3 days into our honeymoon. "Kiara, sweetheart, I know we haven't spoken in a while, but I wanted to call and say congratulations on your marriage. I saw the announcement in the paper. I'm happy for you. You deserve all the good things coming your way. I also wanted to tell you something, and I hope it doesn't seem out of place. My son has been struggling, not in ways I can fix, and not because of any one thing. But I think he's learning some hard lessons about what happens when you take people for granted. I don't expect you to care about that, and I wouldn't ask you to. I just wanted you to know that I see what you've built, and I'm proud of you. Take care of yourself." I saved the message, but I didn't call back. In November, the Family Justice Center hosted its annual fundraising gala. It was the biggest event of the year, 300 guests, a silent auction, a program featuring families we'd helped and community leaders who supported our work. As executive director, I was responsible for everything: the program, the speeches, the acknowledgments. I wore a navy dress that Leonard had helped me pick out, and I stood on the stage in the ballroom of the Charlotte Convention Center, looking out at 300 people who'd paid to support the work we were doing. I saw friends, colleagues, board members. I saw Judge Morrison and Dr. Williams. I saw Sharon and her husband. I saw Leonard sitting at a front table with Jasmine, both of them beaming at me. And in the back of the room, standing near the bar, I saw my ex-husband and Vanessa. They'd purchased tickets like everyone else. It was a public event, open to anyone willing to pay the admission. He was there in his capacity as someone interested in family justice work, or perhaps as someone who needed to be seen supporting the right causes. Our eyes met across the crowded ballroom, and I watched him register everything: my position on the stage, the authority with which I spoke, the respect with which people listened, the life I'd built that had nothing to do with him. I didn't acknowledge him. I didn't need to. I simply continued with the program, introducing our keynote speaker, recognizing our major donors, thanking the community for their support. When the formal program ended and people began mingling, he approached me. Vanessa was not with him. She'd stayed at their table, holding Kennedy, who was now over a year old. "Kiara," he said, "that was a powerful program. The work you're doing here is really important." "Thank you." He shifted his weight, that familiar gesture. I wanted to say congratulations on everything. The position, your marriage, all of it. You've really built something impressive. I looked at him fully, perhaps for the first time in years without any residual emotion clouding my vision. I saw him clearly, a man who'd made choices that had seemed reasonable to him at the time, who'd rewritten history to make those choices make sense, who was now standing in a room full of people who respected me and realizing that the narrative he'd constructed about our marriage no longer held any power. "I appreciate that," I said simply. "I've been thinking a lot lately about the past," he continued, "about things I said and did that I regret, about how I treated you, especially at the end." I waited. "I was wrong," he said, "about a lot of things, and I'm sorry." For a moment, I considered all the responses I could give. I could accept his apology graciously. I could tell him it didn't matter anymore. I could offer some version of forgiveness that would make this moment feel resolved. but none of that would be honest. "I believe you're sorry," I said finally, "but I don't need your apology. I needed your respect years ago and you couldn't give it. Now I have something better, a life built entirely on my own terms, and the certainty that I never have to wonder whether I'm enough. I know I am." He nodded slowly, and I saw something cross his face. Not anger or defensiveness, but a kind of quiet recognition. The understanding that this was not a door left open, not an invitation to closure or reconciliation. This was simply the truth, offered without cruelty but also without compromise. "I'm glad you found that," he said. "So am I." Leonard appeared at my side then, his hand finding the small of my back in that familiar gesture of partnership. "Kiara, Judge Morrison would like to introduce you to someone from the foundation board." I turned to my ex-husband one last time. "Enjoy the rest of the evening." Then I walked away with my husband toward the future I'd chosen, leaving him standing in that ballroom with the full weight of his loss, finally, completely visible. I didn't look back. In the months that followed, I heard through Charlotte's interconnected professional network that he and Vanessa had moved to Atlanta. A new job opportunity, people said. A fresh start for their family. The move was quick, accomplished in less than 60 days. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need them. What I knew was this: absence had done its work, not through drama or confrontation, not through revenge or retaliation, but through the simple, devastating truth that I was no longer available. Not for his crises, not for his guilt, not for his belated recognition of what he'd lost. I was busy building something else, a marriage built on mutual respect, a career that reflected my values, a life that belonged entirely to me. And in Charlotte's tight-knit Black professional community, where everyone eventually heard everything, my absence from his life became its own kind of story. The woman who'd been called a mistake, the woman who'd been asked for help when convenient, the woman who'd simply refused to be available. People noticed, people respected it, and my ex-husband learned, slowly and painfully over years, what it meant to have genuinely needed someone who had every reason to help but chose not to. That choice, I realized, was the only revenge I'd ever needed. It was quiet, it was permanent, and it was mine. On my 1-year anniversary with Leonard, we were sitting on our back porch. We'd bought a house together in Plaza Midwood, close to where I used to live alone, watching the sun set over Charlotte's skyline. He was reading the newspaper, and I was reviewing notes for a presentation I was giving to the state legislature about family justice reform. My phone buzzed with a text from Sharon. "Did you hear your ex and Vanessa are getting divorced? She filed papers in Atlanta last week." I read it twice, then set my phone down. Leonard looked over. "Everything okay?" "Everything's perfect," I said, and I meant it, because whatever was happening in my ex-husband's life, whatever consequences he was facing, whatever lessons he was learning, had nothing to do with me. I'd made myself unavailable years ago, and I'd never looked back. That absence, that refusal, that quiet boundary maintained across years and multiple attempts to breach it, that was my victory. Not because he was struggling, but because I was thriving. And I'd done it without him having any access to my peace, my progress, or my presence. That was the revenge I never had to take. I simply withdrew, and that changed everything. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. And before you go, click on hype to help this video reach even more people. Your support keeps these voices alive and keeps our community growing. Thank you for listening.